Welcome back to the California Conversation. I'm Tess Abraham. Earlier this month, the California DMV canceled 13,000 commercial driver's licenses in accordance with an order from the federal government. Now, the federal government is arguing that these driver's licenses shouldn't even have been issued in the first place, and it all boils down to the same topic of immigration status. So, who is right? Are opponents of the federal government's order who are saying that this will affect commercial trucking, that this will remove jobs from hardworking people who live here in California? Are they correct, or is the federal government doing the right thing by requiring California to remove these licenses and remove these drivers from our streets? I am breaking it all down for you today. But before we get started, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you stay up to date on all things California politics. And if you want more information or you want sources cited in compiling today's episode, then you should check out the corresponding article on my website, which is linked below. All right, so you may have seen in the news really over the past few months, it's not just recent, but over the past few months, there's been a lot of discourse about car crashes, about fatal crashes across the United States, and then about the fact that these are linked to drivers who have commercial driver's licenses that often have been issued in the state of California. And if you've seen this, you may have started to wonder, what is happening here? Why do we keep having these fatal accidents that go viral and blow up into national news? Why are they bringing up something like immigration status in the discussion? And should California have been issuing these CDLs to these drivers? There is a lot here to unpack. So let's start from the very beginning. The very first incident that kicked off this discussion happened in August of last year, and this was the Florida Turnpike crash. Now, at the time, this again went viral. It blew up into national news because what happened was there was a driver of a commercial vehicle. He was driving down the Florida Turnpike, which is the highway, and he went to make an illegal U-turn. And so how he did that was he crossed several lanes of traffic in order to try to U-turn to the other side of traffic to go the other direction. And so in doing that, he crossed lanes and there were cars that were coming straight. And so what happened was a minivan actually crashed into the commercial vehicle and it got wedged and stuck underneath the vehicle. And unfortunately, that killed every passenger who was in the minivan, which resulted in the deaths of 3 people, very tragically. And at the time, this seemed crazy because the question was, what was this driver thinking? No logical person who knows how to drive thinks that you can just take a U-turn when you're on the freeway and you can just cross several lanes of traffic, especially when you're driving a very large truck that could very easily harm someone. And so the drama started to unfold because it all came out that the driver was an illegal immigrant and that he had been issued his commercial driver's license in the state of California, even though he was in Florida at the time. And so DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin responded to this, and she said, quote, 3 innocent people were killed in Florida because Gavin Newsom's California Department of Motor Vehicles issued an illegal alien a commercial driver's license. This state of government is asinine. How many more innocent people must die before Gavin Newsom stops playing games with the safety of the American public? And so instantly, this became a very politicized issue. It started to rightly get a lot of attention and have a lot of questions swirling about it. But the scariest part is it doesn't really seem like this is a one-off event, because since then we have seen similar incidents happening. But more than that, there are longtime truck drivers who are actually reporting that they're starting to see some shifts, some trends in the driver's licenses that are being issued to change the population of who's engaging in this type of work. And so one trucker said, quote, "This has been a big problem within the last 5 to 8 years. There's a lot of people that cannot read or speak English, and it's causing a lot of problems." And so obviously that brings up even more questions related to the entire immigration debate, because the question is, are these drivers fully understanding the laws that are in place in our country for how to drive? And alongside that, can they speak the language sufficient to be able to read road signs and interact with the public if they need to? And so that was the first event that kicked everything off. But After that, there was a subsequent event that continued to put pressure on the state of California in this arena. And that crash happened in October. Now, there was an entirely similar pattern to what was going on with the first crash. There was a driver of a commercial truck. This time, he failed to slow when traffic in front of him slowed. And so his lane started to come to a stop just due to congestion. And he rammed right into several cars. And it ended up being a situation where 8 vehicles, which is wild, 8 vehicles, 4 of which were commercial, were included in this accident, in this pileup. 3 people were injured and 3 people tragically were killed. So this was a really big event. And again, it was similar in that the driver was found to be an illegal immigrant and the driver was found to have been issued his CDL in the state of California. And so once again, DHS responded and said, quote, "This tragedy follows a disturbing pattern of criminal illegal aliens driving commercial vehicles on American roads, directly threatening public safety." Now, as a result, this has not just gained national news attention. It has not just gained conversations and clicks and all of that. It's actually prompted direct federal action when it comes to the state of California. And so originally, after that August crash, an audit was conducted by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Mouthful. An audit was conducted, and what this found was that there were severely disturbing themes among how California has been issuing commercial driver's licenses to these drivers. And so it found that California had issued CDLs to drivers whose federal work authorization had expired. So what is happening? What does that mean? That means that if someone was applying for a CDL, California would look at their immigration status. And if they were not a citizen or a permanent resident here, then that means at some point their ability to be in the country legally and their ability to work, because usually immigrants will have a work authorization, is going to expire. And so California would be issuing these CDLs either to people who their documentation showed it already had expired, or they would be issuing CDLs that would be good for up to 4 years after the point when their work authorization was going to expire. So they would look at it and say, your work authorization is set to expire in 2026. We are going to issue this CDL, and it is going to be good through 2030. The audit found that more than 25% of the CDLs that were being issued to non-domicile drivers, that's anyone, again, who's not a citizen or not a permanent resident, were being issued unlawfully. And they were extending, like I said, as long as 4 years beyond the point when they are lawfully allowed to be working in our country. And so that raised a lot of red flags in the audit. On top of that, it found, quote, systemic policy, procedural, and programming errors in California's commercial driver's licensing system. And so it appeared there were very weak controls going on here and that they just were not following the federal regulations in terms of how they were supposed to be issuing these licenses. And so the Department of Transportation from the federal level immediately started to hand down orders to the state of California in terms of what it needed to do. The first thing that they did was they issued an emergency order that all non-resident CDLs, all of those non-domicile CDLs, must expire before work authorization expires. So every time that California goes to issue a CDL to a driver, they need to make sure that the expiration date on the CDL is not past the expiration date on that person's work authorization. They should go hand in hand. Additionally, then, the Department of Transportation also ordered that the state stop issuing all non-domicile CDLs for the time being. They needed to conduct a full audit of all CDLs that had been issued, and they needed to revoke any CDLs where, again, that pattern was happening, that the dates that it would be good for are past the person's work authorization or past the time that they are legally allowed to be in the United States. And that brings us to today, because while all of that happened in the fall of last year, California had a deadline to complete all of this work that was ordered by the Department of Transportation by January 5th of this year. But when the deadline rolled around, California had not complied. They were trying to go about it a different way. They were trying to argue in court systems of how they wanted to go about it. And so they didn't meet it. And as a result of that, the Secretary Sean Duffy of the Department of Transportation ordered that they would be withholding $160 million in funding until California complied with the order and cleaned up what was going on with its CDLs. And so that brings us to this month. And at the beginning of this month, California officially canceled 13,000 of these non-domicile CDLs, which is a giant number. It means that many drivers should not be on the roads any longer. So all of that is the details on how we got here. And if you heard the stories about the car crashes, if you have heard outrage about California issuing CDLs to illegal immigrants, that's the breakdown of what has been going on and the breakdown of why the federal government is saying that California has been doing things illegally. But there's a much harder question or a much greater, more important question that we should be asking than just what's been going on and why hasn't California been complying? And that question is the federal government's order justified? Is it the right thing to be doing? And ultimately, who is responsible for what's been happening? Because it's very easy in the news to see something as horrific as a violent car crash, a fatal car crash, and immediately just turn around and point fingers at California and say, well, if you hadn't issued the CDL, we wouldn't have been in this situation. And that has been happening. But my question is that the right line of thinking? What is California in the wrong for? What should they have done instead? And is the federal government, again, justified? So let's just start with what should be clear and what should be non-controversial, because obviously there are going to be parts of this that are more controversial. But what we should all be able to agree upon is the fact that a commercial driver's license is not just merely a title. It's not just something that should be handed out freely. It's an actual safety certification. Because when you think about it, these vehicles can weigh up to 80,000 pounds. They are huge. And if you're ever driving on the freeway and you have commercial vehicles next to you, it can be kind of scary. And I hope that you see me in your blind spot here. And usually you try to speed up to get past them because it's not fun to just be sitting right next to them when you're in the lanes. These are giant trucks and they can do a lot of harm. And often if there is a crash, then the commercial truck isn't the one that's going to be severely harmed. It's usually the very small passenger car next to it that's going to be in a much tougher situation. So we need to take that seriously. There's a great responsibility that falls on the shoulders of the people who are issuing licenses to drivers who are going to be operating this heavy machinery that really is a weapon that can be used against people. So if you issue licenses freely, if you do so not in line with federal regulations or even your state regulations, then all of a sudden those licenses don't mean anything anymore because they're supposed to carry weight. It's supposed to say you have a certain level of skill or a certain knowledge base that someone else doesn't. And so we trust you to be able to operate this equipment safely. We trust you to be able to do it in a way that will benefit society and not just harm people on the roads. Versus just the average person maybe wouldn't have that knowledge base or wouldn't have that skill set. But if you hand them out to people who are not equipped to be able to handle those vehicles in a way that will be useful and safe, then all of a sudden the CDLs don't mean anything because it just seems like anyone can get them and they can just operate the vehicle. But with this issue, the question becomes, why is immigration status brought up at all in this? What does this have to do with getting a commercial driver's license? Because in theory, if you can drive, then you can drive, right? It's not really a matter of if you are here legally or not. So why is that a federal requirement? And why does it matter, or should we care about the fact that California has been issuing these licenses to people who are illegal immigrants? But the broader point here is not about the fact of whether someone can drive or not. The point of issuing this type of safety certification, the point of issuing a license at all, is about whether the government can verify who someone is and if they could do that reliably. And then on top of that, they have to also be able to tell if that person is authorized to be here. Because if you are issuing these sort of government documents, these licenses, then you also have to see if someone is compliant with current law, both state and federal. And then on top of that, it also provides a mechanism for our state government to be able to track and monitor these things over time. And so monitor being able to continue to verify who someone is and to verify if they are compliant with current law. And so issuing licenses past the time when someone is legally authorized to be in our country or legally authorized authorized to work as well, because CDLs are often for work, creates a gap in the framework where suddenly our state is not able to do those things anymore. They are not able to continue monitoring. They're not able to continue verifying who people are or verifying that they're compliant with law, because now you have a situation where the dates don't line up. Someone's work authorization has expired, but California is continuing to let them have the tools in which that they need to work. So they go against each other. They don't work together. And of course, there's the broader point that federal regulations, which are the ones that require immigration status as part of getting a CDL, federal regulations have to have consistent standards that apply across the board equally to everyone. And so the fact that California made exceptions for people, the fact that they didn't adhere to the federal regulations, means that not every person is treated the same way, because some people are having an exception made to the laws that are in place, while others are abiding by the law that is in place. And so it was not enforcing this consistently across the board. And this doesn't surprise us, because this shows what your priority is in setting laws, in enforcing laws, and in the policies that you are going to continue to champion. And we know that California has continually prioritized illegal immigrants over its own citizens and over the people who have gone through the legal channels in order to be here. And so we've talked about several bills that have been passed or proposed on the show that do just that. And one that is in this space of driver's licenses was Assembly Bill 60, which was passed all the way back in 2013. And this allowed illegal immigrants to obtain a standard driver's license. So this wasn't to do with commercials, but it allowed standard driver's licenses without any proof of legal residency. Now, the reason that California was doing this, the reasoning that they provided, was the idea that if they are going to drive anyway, if there are going to be illegal immigrants who live in our communities and who work among us, then that means that they likely are going to be driving. Then it is safer for everyone if they are licensed and if they are continually monitored by being in the system of the DMV. But we have to understand that this is a complete shift in, again, what the priority is, because it takes away the priority of enforcing the law and actually enforcing the safety of the people who are on our roads. And instead, it ensures that people who are breaking the law, because yes, being here without legal status or working without work authorization is breaking the law, it's making sure that they're able to just continue doing so. And so it's just resigning ourselves to the fact that people are going to break the law and saying we are going to allow them to do that because it's too hard to stop them. So there's a question here of what if instead of just throwing up our hands and saying, well, people are going to break the law, so let's just make it legal. What if instead we just enforce the law that we already had in place, and that we continue to prioritize the safety of the public, as well as, again, a society that actually operates under laws and has order in place to make sure that everyone is continually safeguarded and to make sure that society can continue to flourish. I think that should probably be our focus, rather than saying, well, you're going to break the law, so we just will take it away. It never works. It never works to say this is against the law, but people are doing it, so let's just remove the law. That continues to put us on this trajectory of a slippery slope of what we are going to take away next as a requirement, because now people are breaking further laws. And this matters because this is exactly the pattern that we saw in California with the driver's licenses. It started with the standard driver's licenses saying, well, people are going to drive around anyway. And it moved to commercial driver's licenses to say, well, people want to work in the trucking industry. And so now California couldn't change the law because it's a federal regulation, but they just didn't enforce the rules. They just loosened the safeguards that were in place. And so we see that it shifted and moved, because once you break one rule, it's likely that you're going to turn around and start breaking another. And so we need to understand the key issue here is not just that some drivers on the road may not have legal status in California. That is an issue because our state shouldn't do anything to accommodate or to incentivize illegal immigration. We should not be okay with that. But that alone is not the only issue at play. The real issue is the downward slope that our state has continued to take to actually accommodate these drivers with disregard for the people who might be put in harm's harm's way as a result. And this hasn't only been in California. The actual perfect example of this started at the federal level in 2016 with the Obama administration, because under President Obama, he got rid of the English language proficiency requirement for CDLs. And so basically there is a requirement that is still in place under federal regulation that says that in order to obtain a CDL, you need to be able to pass an English language proficiency test. And that means that you basically need to be able to read English well enough to read road signs, and you need to be able to speak English well enough to speak with the public, because you might interact with the public as a driver, or to interact with law enforcement and to understand what they are saying and to be able to respond to them. Now, Obama didn't take away that requirement. It's still there under federal regulation, but he took away the enforcement of it. So he said that drivers could no longer be rejected from getting a CDL because they don't pass the English language proficiency test. That's a bit of a mouthful too. So drivers couldn't be denied a CDL. They just could receive a citation if something happens on the road where they're not able to interact with law enforcement or where they're not able to understand the road signs. And this is firsthand experience, because per commercial drivers, there has been an influx of drivers who, quote, cannot read road signs, cannot communicate with law enforcement, and cannot understand the safety placards on the loads they are hauling. And that is directly from truckers who have been interviewed by these investigations and by these audits that have been done into the issues at play here with the CDLs. And so people are seeing this happen firsthand. And so what is all of this revealing? What it's revealing is our state's true priority when it comes to the policies in our state, because it is not unreasonable to ask someone to be able to speak English sufficient to understand the rules of the road and, again, the road signs that they're going to see. That's not unreasonable. We should want every single driver, whether you are driving a commercial truck or a standard vehicle, but especially if you're driving a commercial vehicle, we should want every single driver to be able to understand the speed limits, to understand any warning signs up ahead, to be able to interact with the public, to be able to speak to a police officer, and to be able to know the laws so that they aren't putting us in harm's way as they are operating these large commercial vehicles. It's also not unreasonable, though, to say that we shouldn't be issuing driver's licenses to people without legal status in our country. Because, again, the law needs to apply equally to every person. And federal law, which requires legal immigration status as well as legal work authorization, should be respected and upheld. The government should never accommodate someone breaking the law. And so if someone is breaking the law by trying to work here or trying to be here, not on status that has been granted to them, then our state government shouldn't just look the other way on that. Our state government should work in lockstep with the federal laws that in place for our entire country. And again, every person should be encouraged to pursue legal pathways to be here, not just rewarded or made able to be here without pursuing those legal pathways. And if they do that, they will be able to get a CDL. They will be able to get a standard driver's license, because if you are here as a citizen or as a permanent resident or as a resident who is here on a status that has been in place or has been extended for the appropriate amount of time, then you are able to get these type of accommodations. But if you are not, you should not be able to get them. And what we see is the Trump administration is trying to move back to law and order. They're trying to move back to a place where CDLs mean something, where it means that people are qualified to be doing these jobs, where it means that people who get them are compliant with both federal and state law. And so when it comes to the question of who is right and is this the right move for the federal government, I would emphatically say yes, that it is the right priority for our federal government to be taking, and that California should be falling in line with what they've been ordered to do. Now, when it comes to the public response, this has been a very public issue. Like I said, it's gotten national attention, and there's been mixed responses. The main objection that I've been seeing is there are hardworking people who live here, who depend on a commercial driver's license in order to provide for themselves and their family. They may not have legal status here, but they are trying to contribute to society by working. We need the trucking industry. And so by revoking 13,000 CDLs, that means people are going to lose their jobs, which is not good. And on top of that, there are going to be shortages in the trucking industry, which is also not going to be good because it could have supply chain impacts. And I think those are real questions. I think that those are valid points to bring up. And then again, I don't want to just brush off as if, oh, it's not important. Those are important. But I think the issue here is deeper than the trucking industry, and it's deeper than just the CDL debate. I think the issue has to do with how we are handling immigration and how we are handling immigration laws and reform as a whole, as a country, and then again as a state. And so the way that I would respond to those questions, the answer that I would give, because I just said that I think the federal government's doing the right thing. So that means that I am not as concerned with, or at least those concerns about the trucking industry, about people losing their jobs, have not swayed me on what I think is right. So the response that I would give would start by saying immigration is messy. It's a messy issue. And I can say that as someone whose husband is a first-generation immigrant. I understand that immigration is not always a straightforward thing. There are some people who are able to come to the United States in a pretty easy, straightforward manner. And then there are other people who the process is longer for, the process is more expensive, it is incredibly difficult to get here. And then on top of that, there are some people who are trying to come to the United States to flee very bad situations, to flee violence in their home country, or to pursue better opportunities. And so really that's to say some immigrants are genuinely good people who love America, who want to come here to build a better life for themselves, who want to take advantage of all of the freedoms that America has to offer and contribute back to her. And we love that. We want to champion that. We absolutely love people wanting to love America because I think that America is the best, and I want others to experience that as well. There are also immigrants, though, that we have to be honest with ourselves in, who are criminals. We see this. We see immigrants who come here with criminal records from other countries, who come to the United States just to take advantage of the United States, who come to California specifically because they know that California does not enforce immigration law. There are people who come here who are part of gangs in other countries, who come to commit acts of violence and acts of domestic terrorism here. And so there are two groups. There are some immigrants who are absolutely wonderful, and there are some immigrants who are not so wonderful. That's just the reality of it. Immigration is messy. And so with that, every law that is passed by our country and every law that is passed by our state that has to do with immigration is going to affect both groups of people, because both groups of people exist and are all getting here through the same channel, which is immigration. Now, some would argue that because there are hardworking immigrants who are here who may happen to not have legal status, that because there are people who want to genuinely live here and do good by the community, that our state should protect them, that it is unfair to pass laws that are going to apply as equally to illegal immigrants who have criminal records and who have bad intent as it is to apply that to a hardworking father who is trying to flee violence in his home country and give his children a better life. But what I would say to that is that type of argument fundamentally misunderstands laws and misunderstands government. Because as I mentioned, laws must apply equally across the board. Policy cannot be customized to each individual person. Policy is not written for your unique circumstance, and government must always consider the greater good. They have to try to do right by the majority of people, and specifically, first and foremost, by the people who are given to them under their care in their jurisdiction, namely who would be their citizens and their legal permanent residents. And so we have to understand that with every issue, not just immigration, with every issue, public policy cannot address each individual person. And so you might feel like you have really good reasons why you should be the exception, or you have really good reasons why someone you know should be the exception. But laws cannot bend or break for individual people, because when we do that, that's what leads to anarchy. That's what leads to everyone saying, I know better than the laws that are in place. I know better than the government that is over me. And so I'm going to do what's right in my own eyes. And America cannot function off of that kind of model. And so we see that laws really are black and white. They're written to apply to the majority of the public. They promote order, they prevent chaos, and they uphold the very principles that are going to keep individuals safe. And so we have to understand that laws are written to govern the many, not to make exceptions for the few. And this is the case when it comes to the CDL requirements. Are there going to be some people who drive on our roads, who speak English proficiently, who never break a driving law, and who are safe when they are operating a commercial vehicle, who happen to not have documented status here in the United States? Absolutely. I am sure that there are many wonderful immigrants who are doing just that. But does that mean that we should assume that is the case for every undocumented immigrant and that then we should make the laws different so that there are not those stringent requirements any longer? No. Instead of advocating to bend or break the laws, we should be advocating for good people, for the people who we agree share our ideals of a nation to obtain legal status here. And I can agree that's a larger conversation about immigration reform, and there's much reform that could be done in that arena. But we should always advocate for people to pursue the legal channels to become an American citizen or to become a permanent resident and to do so legally. And we should help them to that end. You can work with lawyers to make that happen. You can work with the federal government to make that happen. And so you can advocate for people to be here who you think should be here. That's completely acceptable. But it doesn't mean that then we are comfortable bending and breaking the laws. Because again, that means that we are all just operating of what we think is right. And that's not how it works in a flourishing society. So there is a lot going on between our state and our federal governments in this arena. And I am sure that there is going to be much more information to come in the many more months, especially as California deals with the impact of revoking these CDLs. And so we will have to keep a close eye on it. But we have seen that the government must prioritize its citizens. It must uphold the rule of law first, and it must pass policy that is rooted in truth and that is rooted in outcomes that are the best for the most amount of people, for that greater good. Because when laws are enforced consistently, then you don't end up in the situation that California finds itself in today. You actually prevent the tragedies and their horrendous consequences from happening in the first place. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was helpful for you as you navigate life in our state and that you even learned something new. If you love this show, please spread the word and share it with your friends, family, and fellow Californians. And I'll see you back here next time for another episode of the California Conversation.